Hi, and welcome to our monthly astrological forecast. I'm Starlene Breiter here with Mark Metheny. We are going to be talking about the forecast for December 2024, the astrology coming up, and we'll give a little bit of, if we have time, we'll give a little bit of clues to maybe some big players of next year, which of course we'll get into next month. But since it's a new year, we'll want to do that too. And also, Mark, we're celebrating a whole year of doing this now. So, yay!
That's right. That's right. We made it through all 12 months.
Can you believe it? We did. That's great. So, fun stuff. And I mean, we went through some really challenging, crazy things this year. Not personally, but like astrologically, there was a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, the April eclipse seems like that was like 5 years ago.
I know.
It's
I
like
think so. I've lived six
so much
lives, and
happening.
I have a husband that I don't even know where he's at, and and I have like a different children. I don't know. I feel like life is just completely swapped around, and of course that's not literal. But yeah, so this month is going to be fun. But before I get into this month, I just want to mention Mark's website is coming along, and it's not up to be able to see it yet, but if you're watching this in the future, you will be able to check it out. His link is going to be in the description box. It's rabbitholeastrology.net. And my website, of course, you can find me at starlenebreiter.com and seriousastrologyschool.com. I have astrology classes that are coming up and tarot classes that are coming up in the new year. So if you're interested in learning something like that, they don't start till mid January, but check them out. So I just wanted to mention those two things before we dig in. Before we dig into each one of the days and the aspects, tell me what your overall for this month is.
So probably the biggest time is like right now because we have Mars and Neptune. So Mars and Neptune are going to be stationing within about 24 hours of each other this coming weekend. And Venus enters Aquarius and is conjunct Pluto at the same time. And the sun makes its opposition to Jupiter also. So that's all like this weekend. So I would say like this weekend is the biggest time period of the month. We later in the month, actually the day before Christmas, of course, we have the second of three, I believe, Jupiter Saturn squares.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
probably the other. That's probably the second biggest time period, but there's so much going on this weekend that I'd say that's probably the biggest time period of the month.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So this weekend is going to be. Today's actually Sun is conjunct Mercury, right? Isn't that correct? The Sun conjunct Mercury on the 5th.
Yes.
I lost my. So it's the inferior conjunction of the Sun. So what that means is that the Sun or that the Mercury is on the inside of the Sun and Earth. I'm trying to think of our planet. So that means it's a halfway point between Mercury retrograde. So when that happens, that means we're halfway through. Which Mark and I were talking about that. We've had a couple weird Mercury retrograde things going on. I have too. It's just been like a little chaotic, but maneuvering through it. So that's going to be tonight. And that probably, for me, it seems like, and I don't know if you've experienced this or not, Mark, but for me, it seems like the highest Mercury retrograde issues usually around the station and direct and station retrograde, and then like the conjunction in the middle. So
Yeah.
If you were going to give me like go ahead. I'm sorry. I asked you a question, then cut you off.
I know I've said this many times before over the many shows we've done together, but I would like if somebody wanted to know like the one like they don't have time to learn all the ins and outs of astrology and it, but they just want to learn a few things that'll help them the most, and that is learn where the outer planets are in your chart, because when and especially if you were born at one of those time periods like the mid to late 60s or the early 90s or something where you've got like a big configuration in your outer planets, that's going, if you just follow that, you'll catch a lot of the things that you'll need to be prepared for. Because like this Mercury retrograde right now, which we have a mutable T square happening right now too, which I'm sure we'll get into. But like this Mercury retrograde right now is square to my Uranus Pluto conjunction. So like every day just gets like every day up weird.
I think we got bumped or something. I hope we didn't get disconnected completely. Are you still there?
No, I'm still here. I think I was talking. It looks like you disappeared for a second.
Oh, because it just, anyway, it did look like I did, everything disappeared and I just hit the button. Okay, good. So that's good. Hopefully we didn't get disconnected on YouTube. All right. So you were saying that it's best to find where the outer planets are in your chart, or track the outer planets. Like which one is more important, or are they both important?
Well, they're both important, but if you're wanting to catch most of the big transits in your chart without like having to spend like hours a day or whatever, it's kind of I would like recommend following when any of the planets are making aspects to the outer planets in your chart, because that's when those are probably going to be your peak optimal times and your times that are like going to be like super chaotic. Because
That makes
like I was
sense.
saying, like right now, transiting Mercury is square to my natal Uranus Pluto conjunction, so it's just like every day is just continual like nonstop changing of plans and things, and having to
Right.
redirect and reflow things, and so that's just a brief example of um,
What that could be. Yeah. That
yeah,
makes sense
yeah,
too. I will also say too, if you know your chart overall, just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, because what I'm going through right now is with the outer planets is Pluto is on my midhaven and my sun, and then Uranus is on my ascendant. So if you know your birth time, you do need to know your birth time to have accurate information regarding your angles, the houses of your chart. But those are also sensitive spots too. But yeah, that's important too. And those outer planets, they last so long that it just kind of kills you if it not kills you literally, but it's just kind of
yeah.
rough
It's just
yeah, it's like I feel like I don't know if I'm coming or going, and I already have enough of that in just regular life, and this doesn't help. So it's been a lot of shifts and changes, but knowing it has also helped me to kind of utilize it in the best way that I can, kind of knowing where to put my focus or something along those lines, if
yeah,
that makes sense. So yeah, that's good.
yeah.
So, okay. So let's jump into this. Let's start talking about it. I just got all of the aspects that we have for coming up for this month. And hi, everybody in the chat. I saw you guys said hi. Some people said hi. Let's get into this. So we already passed the second, but we did have on the second. I'm just going to mention this because it's worth mentioning because we didn't cover it. But the second, which was a couple days ago, Venus was trine Uranus. Venus in Capricorn, trining Uranus in Taurus. So Venus and Uranus often make me think of like a lot of joy or fun within the regards to love or romance. And so, you know, if you had a moment of something fun, spontaneous and fun, that probably happened. I also like to look back on astrology, of course, because this is how we learn, by looking at astrology and saying to ourselves, does this fit? You know, did this fit? Did this transit that we were looking at, did it fit what was going on in my life at that time? So you might use that as a reflection too. So we also had Mercury opposite Jupiter, which peaked yesterday, and the sun. The Sun square Saturn, which you'd mentioned, and Venus sextile Neptune. Did you want to talk about this at all? Because this is still going on, even though the peaks of it were yesterday.
Yeah, so that's the mutable T square. There is Sun and Mercury in Sag, opposite Jupiter in Gemini, and they're both square to Saturn in Pisces. So that's so one of the things for this year, and actually it's a 2.5-year cycle that Saturn stays in a sign, but it's been that like with Saturn in Pisces is like Saturn rules time, and Saturn being in Pisces kind of makes things a little unhinged, a little lawless and wild. So that's kind of the like hard to get a grasp on time, is because Saturn is in Pisces. So it just things are just kind of like always in a state of unraveling, I think, is probably the so you're constantly having to like restructure and reorganize things, because it's just Saturn in Pisces is great for like music and literature and things like that, but for like day-to-day stuff, like Saturn in Pisces is difficult to keep things on track. And then with Saturn squaring Mercury retrograde and Jupiter, I think that like it's almost like not possible to set boundaries at this point. It's more like you have to run the way the river's flowing, I think, is the phrase there, maybe, that I just made up off the top of my head. So I think if there's a feeling of like things being really wacky and like unstable and losing track of time and stuff, it's that Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn mutable T square is what's making that feel a little wacky. Oh, and the sun is in there conjunct Mercury. So there's actually 4 planets in this mutable T square. And then whenever we have the moon in Virgo, although Mercury will probably have moved a little from that. But when we have the moon in Virgo, that would make a mutable grand square.
Yeah, I was just looking, and you described my life already.
Yeah, it's just like you're not
like exemplified now. Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably not going to put things in order right now. It's just, I mean, besides just the Mercury retrograde, that alone, like like we were talking before we started, like the Mercury retrograde and the mutable signs is like it really mixes things up. Like it's hard to keep your best to try and like focus on what you need to get done and not worry that everything is perfect and everything's in amazing alignment and whatever. It's more like, that's good enough for now. Keep going.
Keep it moving. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And that's what it feels like. Almost like it's not like you're stuck, but because it seems like the energy to move is still there, but it's just like you almost feel like because things do seem to set back at times, like it's almost like you're spinning your wheels a little bit. So I do understand what you're saying, and I feel like I've been feeling that a lot. But that's okay. You just learn to run with the punches or whatever and not stress yourself out over it. Hopefully that's possible for most people. Yeah, and
then once the sun enters Capricorn on the solstice, then that tends to like calm things a little bit.
right, things kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, because when we think about Sagittarius, that's a jovial, fun, exciting, kind of energy. It's not wanting to sit still. So yeah, we get more structured when the sun and the rest of the planets, inner planets, move into Capricorn. That's good. And then we have, so that was the 4th, and then on the 5th, we switch up and, oh, I lost it now. I don't know where I put the thing to change it, but we do on the 5th, on the 5th, which is today, we have the Sun conjunct Mercury. What do you have to say about the Sun conjunct Mercury in Mercury retrograde in this time?
Yeah. So here's, I guess I should just add on to the previous thought. So Mercury is very loose and wild when it's retrograde in the mutable signs. And so with the sun there, that kind of exacerbates the loose and wild Sagittarius tendencies and the kind of the feeling of the car's moving, but nobody's hand is really on the wheel. So I've noticed this a lot this week, this last week or so. Of just like everything's moving really fast and like everyone's trying to go really fast, but nobody really knows what they're doing or what they're talking about for the most part. so I think that the sun conjunct the Mercury retrograde is probably in Sag is even more of a time to like just like wait a sec. After you have the idea, wait a second and make sure that your thought process is really in line with what you're trying to say and the point you're trying to get across, instead of just the how can I let me phrase this to not yeah. So you yeah, you want to, things are already loose and wild. You probably don't need to add to that much. That energy is already out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just think for a second before acting. So I'm running into I'm running into a lot of the, like at work and things, a lot of the, everyone's running really fast in different directions, but like the communication is way off, and like people aren't remembering things that they've said, and like the communication is really off, and that there's an antsiness to Sagittarius to where it wants to just wants to run free, like the horse that's its animal thing. I'm not very good at English today. Or some would say most days I'm not very good at English. Unfortunately, it's my native language.
I was going to say Pisces sun, you just can't help it. Like, especially with Neptune so close, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna, telepathically tell you the forecast. That's it.
Yeah, right.
Did you get it?
So, yeah, did you get it?
It's there, right?
Yeah,
You know now, right?
Neptune's about to station on my sun again for like the third out of 5 times or 7 times or something that I get here over a 2-year
Yeah.
period. So
And
yeah,
with
so that
Pluto
and having
and
Mercury
Uranus on mine, angles, we're
yeah.
just fun, excited. We should call it the Outer Planet podcast.
Yeah.
So funny because there's so much going on. Yeah. But I think you're wording decently. I want to interrupt you with breaking news, though, to tell you, because someone asked in the chat, Christina asked in the chat, what do we have for a tsunami warning that has been issued like 15 minutes ago off the California coast? I guess there was an earthquake, a 7.5 magnitude. So would you think about anything like that with weather? I was trying to look it up and not interrupt you from talking at the same time, but that's really interesting. That's kind of scary. I haven't done any kind of looking into weather or, earth things like that. Although I have been talking to other astrologers that do that. So, I don't really know what I would think would cause that. Do you have any idea, Mark? Or, well, not that astrology causes things. I should change my verbiage there because it doesn't cause things, but it enhances things, I would say. It tells the secrets.
I'm looking to see where the earthquake was. So I would say with Mars and Neptune both stationing, so usually when they give those to me, I think that is normally one that would not have that much potential damage to it, but being that there's a Neptune station, there could be some issues with that. And yeah, and I had not caught that had happened. I would probably pay attention to the warnings in your local area if you're in the California region.
Yeah, that would be kind of. I don't know anything about earthquakes. I have a friend who's done some research on earthquakes, though. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's really fascinating to me.
So yeah, so sometimes I have noticed that there are a pretty good amount of earthquakes while Mercury's retrograde, but any kind of event like Uranus usually is earthquakes, especially Uranus and Taurus, which I know there's a Moon Uranus square somewhere here. Tomorrow evening, Friday evening, there is a Moon Uranus square. So I would say that has the potential to be a pretty big event. So I know that like Uranus usually rules earthquakes, although you'll see some Pluto stuff. But with the tsunamis, that's usually a Neptune thing. I believe the was it 2010 or 2011, the Fukushima earthquake.
That's what I was just going to say. Happened. It was a tidal wave, or no? Was it an earthquake?
Well, I think it was an earthquake that caused a tsunami.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And that happened very close to Neptune first entering Pisces. And now in the late degrees of Pisces is stationing in 2 days. So I would say that could turn out to be a big event.
Hmm. Wow. And then, okay, so that's the Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, mutable T-square, Sun conjunct Mercury, what we talked about for tonight. That is this evening when it happens. I had thought that had already passed for some reason, but I don't know, my time frames lately have been a little skewed, which is probably what you were talking about earlier. Like my perception of time has been a little bit different. That's yeah, I'm like, I just sat down to do this and 3 hours passed and I'm like, why am I still here doing this? Like, what happens?
Right. Because like time doesn't really exist like naturally. Time is a man-made Saturn construct to measure our days and you know, things like that. So it's like animals don't know what time it is. Other, you know, they know it's dinner time, but just because that's when you normally feed them. So there is.
Yeah, my cats know what time it is, especially in this time when I'm walking them, which is now because of the weather's beautiful. I have my little stroller, and they know like 5, 6 o'clock. My boy has a clock. My boy has a watch, but his name is Saturn, so maybe that's why. So, okay, I'm being silly, but let's move on to the 6th. Tomorrow's the 6th. We have Mars station retrograde at 6:33 p.m. Mercury square Saturn at 8:53 p.m. What are you feeling about Mars station retrograde first? I mean, when Mars goes retrograde, do we feel tired? Is that like a thing that you feel or notice, or what?
Right. So I have Mars retrograde in my natal chart. So I found that the energy is still there. It's just folded in. It's not as outward. Although when poked and prodded, it definitely comes out full force when you're challenged. It's just you prefer not to fight.
Where is Mars in your chart? I don't remember off the top of my head.
It's at 2 degrees Scorpio in my first house, conjunct my ascendant, which is at the end of Libra, and it's conjunct my south node. So I have uh, a fairly diabolical Mars, I would guess, that I have to keep on a short leash.
That's hysterical.
That may not be my only diabolical planet, but
that is really funny. That makes me laugh. My Mars is not all that wonderful either. It's in Taurus and in the 12th house, but it's not making like major aspects to like really strong aspects to a lot of planets. So maybe that's what saves me.
So Mars is opposite my Venus and North Node, and my Mars is quincunx to my Saturn. So I have to, my Saturn's really strong, even though it's retrograde also, and it's conjunct my Sun, which is at the end of Pisces. But I have to do a lot of finagling to get my Mars and my Saturn to work and play together on the same team, because they tend to want to go their own directions, and that's the quincunx aspect.
Right.
Is there's some adjustment needed.
So you know what we do? I'll tell you something with quincunxes. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I understand that the plight of the quincunx is real. But you know what we do in VA when we have a quincunx, we in vibrational astrology, which is the type of astrology I teach, we double the vibration. So it's natal, we would double it to see if it brings in another planet, because a quincunx, when you double it, turns into a sextile. So it always turns into a sextile. So if it brings in another planet, then you kind of read it that way. And so if you're in the first vibration, it's just doubling it would be, making the oppositions conjunct, but it could bring in another planet that could give you a way to deal with it in a certain way. So that's a tip just to think about, looking at the vibration chart or harmonic chart. It's called harmonics as well. So, but that's a way to kind of resolve them, because you're right. Quincunxes, like, they have this issue with the two planets in the quincunx. They're not like communicating well,
Yeah, they're different.
On a different wavelength or something, right?
Yeah, right. They're different by element, by modality, and by duality. So they don't naturally connect. You have to connect them.
Yeah, and that's how we've worked through quincunxes, and to figure out how we can work with them is like when they turn into a sextile. And this really helps if you're looking at like higher vibrations, which a lot of people don't do that. But if you're looking at 8 vibration, you would double that to 16 vibration, and you would see where they turn into a sextile, and you could read it better, especially if it brings in another planet into like a circuit kind of pattern. So then you can understand how to work with the quincunx, as opposed to like, oh, these two planets are just quincunx and sucking in, life is hard because of that. Instead of that, you just kind of, yeah. So that's a fun little tip there. But that makes that makes sense in what you were saying about your energy going back to Mars. That makes sense. How your Mars and your Saturn working, in different ways to each other. So yeah. So okay, we covered Mars. Go on.
So my Mars is always working, but it's usually internalized.
Oh yeah, and that's the retrograde part, right?
And that's the retrograde part.
Mm.
Is like Mars and Scorpio never stops thinking or never really relaxes. It just from the outside looking in, it looks calm, but from the inside looking out, there's plans being made. You just have to.
That's the diabolical part.
That's the diabolical part.
That's hysterical. That's funny. And then we also have the Mercury square Saturn. Did we cover? You didn't cover that yet, right? And the Mercury, of course, is squaring Saturn in retrograde. Mercury's in retrograde, not Saturn. But
yeah, so that is adjustments that need to be made to Saturn is structures, Mercury's mental processes. So that's shows you doors that are closed or closing, or adjustments that need made to like how you have your day-to-day activities set up.
So adjusting or structuring your days might be helpful for you today or this evening. Well, and tomorrow is the exactness of it.
Right.
Is this the list aspect where you make lists? List on list?
Yes, that could be. That's a good list making aspect.
That's a good list making aspect.
But it's not a good cicada aspect.
If you don't make lists of your cicadas, you'll be okay. Oh, funny. So that's okay. So that's Saturday. I'm thinking, no, that's not Saturday. That's Friday. Then Saturday happens. Yes, I'm happy because on Saturday I'm going to Art Basel. I think I'm saying it wrong and enunciating it wrong. So Saturday will be fun for me, I hope. And Venus enters into Aquarius. That means it's conjunct my midheaven and my sun and Pluto. So we have an interesting day on Saturday. Venus goes into Aquarius. That's 1:13 a.m., which it'll be there for probably, I would say, like 6 weeks or so. And then Venus also conjuncts Pluto. That's at 9:08 a.m. The Sun is opposite Jupiter at 3:58 p.m. And then Neptune stations direct. Wow, Saturday is going to be a very busy day in the stars.
Right. So like when a planet stations, you get like the higher effect of that planet for a week on either side, at least. So having Mars and Neptune stationing on the back-to-back day, like almost exactly 24 hours apart, you've got exaggerated Mars energy, exaggerated Neptune energy, Venus entering Aquarius in conjunct Pluto, and then you've got the mutable T square. And those are all happening at the same time. Like all those energies are there at the same time. Uh, I'd say the good thing is that Mars and Neptune. Um, so Mars is stationing retrograde and going back where it's been since I think it was like September 1st or 2nd. I think it was like September 1st. Mars entered Cancer, and then it moved into what, 6 Leo or whatever, where it's retrograding. So it's going to go back. We actually have like an 8-month cycle where Mars is only in Cancer or Leo up into, and this lasts from whatever, September 1st of this year up until late May of next year. That's so for that whole period, Mars is only in 2 signs. And Venus is going to be in Aquarius for about 3 weeks. um,
Oh, it's 3 weeks? I thought it was 6. I'm
yeah,
just
Venus and
dreaming.
Mercury are about 3 weeks. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I like Venus
No,
in
it'll be,
Aquarius because I have a stellium there. That's so, yeah. It seems
yeah, I know.
lovely, even though I know it's weird.
You want the good Venus transits to linger longer.
Yes, that would be
Um,
lovely, but whatever. It's 3 weeks. Okay, so I've been beat up by Pluto, and I foresee much more beating up by Pluto for the next couple of years because of my stellium. So I'll take the Venus for a
yeah,
week or
Pluto is,
whatever.
yeah, no, the Pluto trans has just been brutal the last like 4 years. Um, so so I guess the Mars Neptune thing. It's like Mars is action, energy, aggression, independence, uh, instinctual behavior, your animal self. So that's turning retrograde. So it's going to be more inwardly focused, where maybe you're so the proper use of that is probably to look at what what triggers you, what makes you angry, where you're putting your energy out there where it's not useful or doesn't need to be. So it's kind of a reassessing of how you distribute your energy. Now Neptune stationing is Neptune is your spirituality, your uh, how else would you put, like the negative traits of Neptune is like addiction and like over self-sacrifice, uh, delusional behavior, things like that. The thing, let's see if I cannot step on any toes here. Uh, the thing that I've been seeing a lot on social media, especially the last few days, and I'm sure it'll probably continue here, is misdirected anger, where uh, Mars and Neptune. So that's why I said it's good that they're not an aspect, because they're not really working in tandem. Because like with Neptune going direct and Mars going retrograde, they're moving in opposite directions, but they're not at a specific major aspect to each other because Mars is in Leo and Neptune's in Pisces. Although shortly they will be an aspect because Mars is going to move back into Cancer and Neptune is going to move even closer to the end of Pisces. So Mars and Neptune will be in a trine, which will start tightening up like as we get to the end of the year. And that's going to be, that trine will be exact in January of next year. um, but the
Do you feel like
Neptune,
they don't really work well together, Mars and Neptune? Is that what you're saying, or does it just depend?
yeah, and both and most scenarios, I'd say they don't, because Mars is about like action and aggression, and Neptune is more about spirituality and nature and non 3D stuff, whereas Mars is very 3D, like on
Mhm.
the kind of the instinct. Mars is very much interacting with its environment constantly,
Mhm.
whereas Neptune is more the daydreaming, the mentally exploring other worlds, that kind of thing is kind of like Neptune's home.
Yeah, that makes
Where
sense. So the two of them aren't necessarily, they don't necessarily have the same goals in mind, so they work a little
yes,
differently. Yeah,
they
they're
have
like different.
they have different interests.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
Yes,
sense. I mean,
so probably the major thing I see is like just the um, misdiagnosis of where problems are coming from and energy negative energy directed towards the wrong areas is the biggest problem that I normally see with like Mars and Neptune stationing at the same time.
mhm. Yeah, that would make sense. A misdirected of the diagnosis of the problem. I like that.
Yes.
It's a good one. It's a good way to think about it too, because if you're going through something and you're trying to figure out what's the underlying reason, because there's always an underlying reason as to why something is going on. Like if you're angry, usually you're not angry just to be angry. There's a reason. There's something. You have to dig a little bit, and Neptune isn't always going to show you that right away. It's not clear. So that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Being mindful of
Yes.
that. But the sun opposite Jupiter, I mean, that's a nice energy, at least for, that the rest of, I mean, it'd just be like a day or whatever. That would be part of it. So you got conflicting things going on Saturday.
Right. Right. And the mutable T square and then the Venus conjunct Pluto. So they're
Mhm.
usually like Venus conjunct Pluto is intense experiences, but being there at the conjunctions in Aquarius, it's going to be weird. It's going to be the unexpected.
It sounds so. Our basil is this big, like fancy. My girlfriend got tickets. She's my friend. She got tickets from her work, and she didn't want to bring her other half, so she was like, "Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Okay, why not?" But it's like really fancy art and like it's a street fair kind of thing. So we're gonna go have fun. That might be an interesting thing going on the Saturday that the Venus goes in conjuncting Pluto and the Sun, or my Sun, and all this other stuff. So should be interesting.
I, I can assure you that the people watching should be very fun and eventful.
She's a double Gemini, so we have a lot of good airy
The,
energy between us. So we'll have a blast. I'm sure we will. Either way, we've always go have
does
fun
she
with
have
each other. So
does
yes,
she have Jupiter on her sun right now?
yes, she does, and she keeps telling me she's going to win the lottery. I'm like, do it. We'll go traveling forever. It would be kind of cool. Yeah, I would be happy for her. Yeah. So cool. Well, Saturday looks like an interesting day. And then we don't have a lot of aspects that are going on between Saturday and the 12th, right? So the 12th comes along and we have Venus opposite Mars. And this happens in the early morning Eastern USA time. That's the time we always do it because that's the time zone Mark and I are in, but you'll have to do your own timing for it. This will last a day or two. I'd say maybe even 2 days because Mars and Venus are traveling close to the same speed, I would assume. Usually right now, so they stay in orb a little bit longer. What are you going to say about Venus opposite?
Well, Mars is not moving.
Oh, it's slow because it just went retrograde. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that
Venus
should.
is much faster.
Yeah, because usually usually Venus moves twice as fast as Mars. So there's probably Venus is going to separate out of this
Quickly.
faster than normal. Well, no, slower than normal because Mars isn't really moving.
Oh, because okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I don't know. It's Mercury retrograde. Maybe nothing is said right.
Right. Maybe Mars doesn't even exist.
So what is up with Mars and Venus opposite of each other?
So this is in fixed signs. So that shows that there's going to be like some kind of stubbornness or something, or resistance to change. So with Venus opposite Mars, that's your things you value may be in opposition to like things you need to get done. So it's kind of oppositions. I always think of as needing balance. And so we still got the Sun, Mercury are still going to be kind of loosely opposite Jupiter. So we got a lot of the, and then Venus opposite Mars. So we kind of got a lot of the opposition energy happening there at that point also. So that's usually trying to have the trying to find a balance between time for pleasure and then getting the things done you have to get done.
Yeah, Venus and Mars, the idea of them being opposite of each other makes me think of the doing something, especially since Mars is retrograde, makes me think about doing something more internal, more like with the hands, with the idea of creation. Venus is there, but maybe it's more internal creation, internal thoughts, having that, or Mars is retrograding. So it'll be interesting. So that's the middle of the month. When we move on to the next one, that's the 13th, is Mercury sextile Venus in Sag Aquarius. So Mercury sextile Venus. What are you thinking about with that one?
Yeah. So Mercury should be starting to slow down at this point because I think it goes direct like a week after that or something, somewhere in that area. So Mercury sextile Venus is usually like so Sag and Aquarius are both probably, if not the two most freewheeling signs. They're two of the most freewheeling signs. So I think Mercury sextile Venus is usually mental playfulness, that kind of. It's usually like mentally positive, and because Mercury is your thought processes, and Venus is pleasurable things, on level. So that's usually things usually go pretty harmonious at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a harmonious communication, some kind of
Yeah.
charming communication. So that will be good. That's always good. And it's just before the full moon. And actually the full Mercury does station direct on the 15th. So it will be definitely slowing down at the 13th during that time. And we're prepping for the full moon, which happens on the 15th. So yeah. So, which is actually the next thing. There's not any exact aspects on the 14th. So the 15th, we have full moon in Gemini and Mercury station direct. So those are happening about 12 hours apart, 11, yeah, about 12 hours apart from each other. Yeah. Well, first let's tackle full moon in Gemini. What are you feeling about full moon in Gemini here?
So usually, so like the full moons, like in the mutable signs, tend to be much more like crazy freewheeling stuff. Like lots of changes and redirections and things like that. Um, so what is it? It's a 23 Sag in Gemini. So that's about what, a week before the solstice. Um, and so kind of so I found like I think usually the most intense full moons, like I'd rate that one pretty low on the uh, trauma scale, if you want, like that I've made up in my head. I would
The trauma scale. Oh my
I would
God.
yeah, the trauma scale. I would rate that pretty low. That's usually not an overly, you know, traumatic one. Um, that usually has a lot to do with like thinking and traveling, and because Gemini rules short range travel, Sagittarius is long range travel. Usually this has a lot to do with like like I wouldn't anything you have planned for that day is really maybe kind of up in the air whether or not you realize it right now. There's a lot of mutability and change. I mean, Saturn and Neptune are both in Pisces. Neptune is still going to be kind of loosely forming a T square with that, because Neptune's going to be at like 27 Pisces, and then we got 23 Gemini and Sag there. Um, that's not like overly heavy or dark or anything. That's usually like a lightish energy, in comparison to other full moons. And then
Yeah.
with Mercury going direct, then there's the ease of the chaos of like everything getting screwed up for the previous 3 weeks. So that tends to like help a little bit.
Yeah. I always like to look at the midpoints on full moons and new moons, because I always look at full moons and new moons as, they're cycles, and the cycle of, starting something new, fresh, and then the cycle of, culmination, which is the full moon. And on this one, Jupiter is actually, there's a midpoint with the sun and Mercury, and with Jupiter at the midpoint. So, and obviously the moon is also mixed in that because it's a full moon. So that also overemphasizes it as well. So I don't know, the midpoints seem, do you ever look at the midpoints like that? Or is that something you just, and kind of like,
No, I do. Uh, so in my Sirius software, I've got lots of midpoints in it, but I tend to look at the midpoints more on like events and things as I
right.
do. I probably do not keep as close a look in my chart for the transiting midpoints, but um,
Yeah.
midpoints are really good when you're like electional stuff, like sporting events,
Yeah.
election type stuff, those kind of things. I think
Yeah.
you get a lot of added information from the midpoints.
Yeah, and there's so many of them that you like you can get overwhelmed with data that you wouldn't even like,
Oh yeah.
know what you're talking about. But that's why like mainly when I'm looking at transits, unless it's an event, something that happened at a specific time, it's looking at them during those new and full moons, which I think are cool and helpful as well. So we have a little Jupiter midpoint mixed in there on that full moon. And then Mercury station direct. What is your whole feel about Mercury station direct? Yes, of course, it's a little bit of a sigh of relief a couple of days later, but what are you, at least this one with it being in Sag?
Yeah. So I've found I get into lots of discussions on the Mercury shadow periods and stuff like that, and I don't put a whole lot of I find pretty much that like things go crazy when Mercury goes retrograde, and then they straighten up pretty quick, like as soon as it goes direct.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll have things that have been broken like fix themselves like almost immediately after Mercury stations direct. Now I will say there is a couple days lag on either, like once it starts moving, I find that things have like fixed themselves pretty quickly. So I don't go too much by the Mercury isn't clear until you're out of the shadow degrees.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of
I
times it
agree with
is good
that.
to wait a few days until it gets moving. But I find things straighten up pretty quick after Mercury goes direct. um,
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the shadow period, now, of course, I do think when the planet is still moving slow, which Mercury doesn't do that, it moves, I mean, it picks up speed quickly because it's a quicker moving
yeah,
planet. But I do think when it's a station for Pluto or something like that, if we were to consider the shadow period of Pluto, we would literally have a couple degrees in the entire year that was not shadow. Like, because
right,
Pluto
right, exactly.
only moves a couple degrees a year. I think Uranus moves 7. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like only a few
Yeah,
degrees.
yeah.
So if
Pluto
you,
moves about 2,
yeah, I think two
and
to
yeah,
three
Pluto moves
degrees,
about
depending where it's at, because the
yeah.
orbit is elliptic, an ellipse. But yeah, it's kind of funny. So I think that yes, when it's slowing, slowing down, or when it's like picking up speed, that then it's definitely more influential. But once it starts going at the speed, it's moving on. So I agree with you on what you were saying about that. Um, so Mercury moves, then we move on to the 18th. The 18th, we have the Sun squaring Neptune, Sag and Pisces at 9:28 a.m. So, what are you feeling about the Sun and squaring Neptune?
Yeah. So I was I've been looking at Neptune more than normal over the last few years, and just because it's hitting so hard on my chart, and I've kind of you kind of, no matter how long you study this stuff, you find other little weird like synchronous or not synchronicities. I can't think of the word. Um, you find little oddities and stuff that you start noticing, and it's like, you know what, any kind of aspect from like the sun or moon or to any aspect to Neptune period from any planet, there's like an extra like level of sleepiness to it. Like there's
Mm.
a Neptune does kind of like kill your energy a little bit. So like Sun square Neptune. So when you have like a square involving Neptune, to me that's there's a little bit of like disillusionment that gets exposed. Like something is like not going to turn out like you thought. I think it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be bad or terrible or death or anything. It's just that like something like turns out like not what you expected. I have also noticed that like so like that Sun Neptune square is at 9:28 in the morning, and this kind of applies to the full moon a few days beforehand either. When you have a like a Neptune or Uranus aspect or a full moon and it's like in the morning, like the sleep patterns are disturbed the night before because like once that aspect's like getting really tight, your psyche, your brain's kind of in overdrive. So like I think that full moon is at like 4:30ish or something in the morning. So like I know that like sleep's gonna be like my sleep is gonna be broken that night before. That I
Mm-hmm.
think that the full moon on the 15th. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that like the night before, like I'm not gonna try to go to bed early because I know
I was
that
just
my brain is gonna be like overactive, and I would rather like work on stuff and like wear my brain out a little bit because I know if I go to bed too early on like the night when the full moon's in the middle of the night or the early the next morning, I know I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to sleep for crap. So I'd rather just like work, give my brain something to chew on instead of like trying to, gee, why am I not asleep yet? And it's like, and then you can pick these things out too. That like when there's like Uranus or Neptune, Pluto stuff happening, like, you know, between midnight and 6 a.m., that's that's when you're more likely to have like the heavy, like some nights you probably dream every night, but a lot of nights you don't remember them. Then you have the other, then you have the other nights where the violence has joined us. um,
the violence has joined us. That's
the
hysterical.
violence the violence is upon us.
But you don't think
But
Neptune would create negative dreams, do you? Or just you're just speaking in general, like
well,
the
if you have a square, if you have Sun square Neptune or Moon square Neptune, that so how I've pieced this together is, um, you know, a planet square Neptune, like it is the feeling that something's off or something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. That's how I've like. You don't even want to know how much time I've spent like like when I have weird dreams or good dreams, bad dreams, like I look at my astro book. I'm like, okay, like what was going on in the middle of the night when I was having these weird dreams and stuff. And it's looks like I have a tail now.
I'm like,
So
what's this? That's
so
funny.
I know that like my like dream time's going to be like exaggerated when you
Mm-hmm.
have those things, and two, like when you have like Mercury trine Jupiter in the middle of the night, like that's probably gonna, maybe that's going to be good dreams, or you know maybe dreams of outer space or something. um, so you try to I try to look at that stuff, and I kind of I realize this all sounds batshit crazy. um, but like I try to plan out like when I think I'm going to be tired, when I'm going to need to go to sleep or try to go to sleep, because you can see the patterns once
Mm-hmm.
look long enough. And so it's like um, well, when I see the negative Neptune aspects, I know I need to tire my brain out
Mm.
more
Yeah.
before I go to bed. as opposed to a night when there's like not really any aspects in the middle of the night, or no, like, moon aspects to stuff. Like we've like I can kind of time. So we set the alarm for 6 a.m. most mornings, but I can tell when the dog's going to get us up before then. So I
Oh
can
my
make,
gosh, that's
I know
funny.
this, so I can tell when she's going to be disturbed in the middle of the night, or when, like, I know if the moon goes into Sagittarius at 5:30 and we have the alarm set for 6, I know beforehand that we're getting up at 5:30. I know that the dog doesn't care what time the alarm is set,
Oh my
because
gosh.
like when the moon enters a sign or something, like, remotely around when it's time, the normal get up time, I know that the dog's going to be determining what time we get up.
See, your dog wears a watch just like my cat Saturn wears a watch. Like, I'm telling you, if I'm just like, usually I'm mindful of like, oh yeah, it's that time of day, like take them for their walk. He loves it. He goes crazy. But no, he will definitely. And if I'm not like paying attention because I'm focused on something with him, he's just like all over me. But it's funny how animals can sense that too. It's a natural energy that they can sense. And I completely agree with you. We're all intertwined in it. Yeah. I always notice too, just as a side note, this isn't what's going on, but when it's a hard aspect from the moon and Uranus, I struggle worse than I normally do with
Yep.
sleeping. And like that to me is like just. And when you're talking about this too, are you talking more about when this is going on in the sky as transit planets, or more towards your own? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So it works for both. It works both
Right.
ways, but more knows more noticeably when it's like transiting moon, square transiting Neptune.
Right, and that makes sense because it's not just you. You've got you and Lauren, and then the animals and whatever else sleeps with you.
Yep.
Like you got a pile of things, in the room with you. Right, I got it. So that makes sense. That does make sense because everybody has their own chart, but that makes sense because it's the energy of the moment, and that's definitely affecting everybody in a different way. That's interesting.
Yes.
I did notice that I'll have to pay attention to the Neptune stuff, and I'm really glad you brought this up too, because this is something I've actually started with my current class that I'm teaching. Is like I made them a whole journal to journal for a year, the transits, and so we could kind of look at them and start seeing how they feel for us, because when we feel them for us, we're better at articulating them to other people, so that's why we're working on this year-long project. I like the tail. It's really fancy,
Yes.
the tail accessory.
Yes.
What cat is that?
We'll have to make some kind of a game or contest out of that. Like, pick the tail out, pick the animal tail, and you get a free reading. But yeah, the journaling thing. Yeah, the journaling thing is another good idea, because that's something I wish that I did that for like several months or a few years at a time, as several different times. I'm like, man, I wish I'd have just done that all the time and like put the aspects under it and stuff. Because I bet that would be a fascinating. Because as you get older and you have more experiences and more things, you're like.
This is when I first started learning astrology, and this is a lot of my journaling. Like literally this, and then I just so much. Some of this is also paperwork from school, but like this is one, and this is just maybe a couple years, and then I would print out the one I would have in Sirius. I'd make for one myself, and I found them, and I would actually use that too, because I think that for me, at least when I was learning astrology, how to understand it, interpret it, it was so helpful to feel it myself because I'm going through it too. But I journaled so much, and that helped me be able to understand, what does this feel like? How do I explain this to my person coming to me? So I do like the journaling thing. And then I bought those daily diaries. We had talked about that a long time ago. I forget which one they were. But the daily diaries, I did that in one of those for a while, so I've done it in different ways. Now I'm like, okay, my students are far away, we'll do it digitally, because I want to be able to like help them along the path with it. So it'll be kind of fun. So that'll be my new, I'm going to do it with them. So it'll be my little thing. But I think that that's the best way, if you're learning astrology, to journal and at least pay attention to like what Mark said with your planets and what's going on in the sky. You'll understand it better to explain it.
Yeah,
so
because that kind of forces you to kind of look at the nuts and bolts of what's going. And after a few, even after probably 3 or 4 months or something, you notice like, oh, every time, yada yada yada, this happens, or I have weird dreams when this happens, or I sleep really well when the moon's void of course for most of the night, things like that. And just even like I've noticed, just like another oddity that I've just picked up from, as I've noticed too, that when the moon's void for like really long periods, like in the morning or through the middle of the day, that like I don't recover very, like my brain does not function that well at night, which is usually my mental high cycles are like early in the morning, after coffee, not before coffee, after the coffee.
Coffee's always,
and then in the evening, and like in the middle of the day, my brain wave electroencephalogram does not work it does not work as well, but then it rebounds in the evening. Like once it gets like dark out, my brain really functions at a higher level, or after I have enough, caffeine to get back into my body in the morning. In the morning, my brain functions really well. But then it's like the spots in the middle of the day. And if there's one of those, like the moon's void of course for 5 hours in the middle of the day or in the morning, then it's like I don't get the mental surge in the evening that I normally get. Because like it takes so much when you have to function, or like do a lot of physical labor or something during those moon void of course periods, I don't function as well in the evening, like even after the moon's entered the next sign, because it's like those void of course periods take so much out of you when you're forced to do a lot. That's why in theory, like when possible, like I try to relax during the moon void of course periods, or do stuff that's maybe tedious or stuff that I don't want to do. Because if I have to do like a lot of like running around, scurrying energy during the moon void of course periods, it just sucks all the energy out of me.
No squirreling around during that. Yeah, no, I can understand that. I think I haven't noticed this to be as effective for me, but like I've heard that in traditional astrology, when the moon was in a good placement, so in a good sign, that it was like in Cancer, for instance, it's exalted in Cancer, that the void of course is not as bad. I haven't seen that really be as effective for me. Maybe it is for others, but have you noticed that when the moon is exalted in a certain sign? Cancer, Sagittarius, I think is the other one. I can't remember which ones it is, or has like dignity or something. Have you noticed that or no?
I've read that. I know there's some people that swear by it.
Right. I know. I don't agree. For me, it doesn't feel that way, but everybody's different. So
no.
yeah.
the exaltations and things I think work somewhat anyway for planets, but I think what's more important than that is where it hits in your chart.
That's true. Yeah.
Because like just I'm just going to throw an example out there that I've seen is like a lot of people don't like Mars in Cancer, and I know that that's supposed to be a bad placement for Mars when it's in Cancer, but it goes really good in my chart. I enjoy Mars in Cancer.
There you go.
I thrive. I do very well with Mars in Cancer because it's aspecting so many other of my planets and making lots of conjunctions and things like that. So while I'd say so every day I put up an astrology post, and I try to put how I think those energies are going to play out for most people that day. However, how I read the transits for myself are usually a little bit different, but frequently they're vastly different than what I'm writing out there for what most people are going to experience. Because my chart's a weirdo, and it's got a lot of different things that the average person is not going to. So I know that a lot of people don't like Mars in Cancer, but so what I write out there for people to expect during that is not how I'm going to play my cards. Because my cards, Mars in Cancer is good, but I know that most people don't feel that.
Yeah, well, it's true. The collective is a certain energy and meaning like everybody, but we all individually have the connection to the collective too. So the answer is kind of twofold in looking at it. And that's the value of knowing your own chart, at least the simplicity of knowing your own chart and being able to look at it, even if it's basic stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. And I agree with you on that one too. Some things like that are definitely not good, favorable, whatever, can be good for me too. So I have a lot of that weird kind of placements in my chart too. Yeah, right. Traditionally speaking.
Yeah, so too, like when I do a reading for somebody, I send them a long transit report, and I've had people ask. The transit report says one thing, which is the planets aspecting their transits, but they'll ask me then, like, but what you posted on your page today says something completely different. And it's like, that's because the report I sent you is the planets interacting with your planet. And right. And the stuff that I'm posting on my wall on Facebook every day is that's the general read for like what most people can expect.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because I'm not looking at the chart of 5,000 people or whatever.
Right, that's an impossibility to do it like that. But yeah, and that's another good point too. If for anybody that is watching that hasn't followed Mark, to follow him, I'll make sure I put his link in to his Facebook in the description. So if you want to check him out, he does those posts and everything. So it's like a daily update of things that you might look out for. So okay. Let's move on to Venus trine Jupiter on the 19th. This is an Aquarius and Gemini. So Venus trine Jupiter seems kind of nice, right?
Yeah, that's, I mean, really, if you had to list all the transits from like, good to bad, like Venus trine Jupiter would have to be near the top of the good. That would have to be one of the like best. Sun conjunct Jupiter, Venus trine Jupiter. That would have to be one of the top 5. Feel goodery.
Feel goodery.
And with yet another word I've made up or stolen. Maybe stolen. So that in Aquarius and Gemini, I mean, especially for the air signs or people with planets in the middle degrees of the air signs. I mean, that should be, and certainly a few days at least on either side of that. That should be like that. That's prime real estate. Um,
Hmm. Yeah,
so that
yeah,
should be, that those are just probably the two. Those two in the sun are probably the three most, feel good planets, and maybe
yeah,
even those two over the sun, even because those, have a lot more optimism even than, a lot of, not that every Saturn or Pluto transit is bad, but that's just Venus trine Jupiter is a good transit.
hmm,
It is in almost every circumstance. It's rare that you'll
that is
find
not. Yeah,
Venus trine Jupiter turns out badly.
that makes sense. And maybe that's a good day to like wind up any kind of holiday, like shopping you might be doing if you
Right.
celebrate holidays, like the 19th. I mean, I always like to try to get all my shopping done prior to, well, of course, prior to the solstice, because I always think that like there's something about just being more expansive in the way that I handle things, with the sun in Sagittarius than in Capricorn. You're just more
Yep.
structured thinking. So, and it moves into Capricorn
Right.
the next day. Oh, well, the 21st this year. So, yeah.
Right.
But I agree. I like the
So
Venus trine Jupiter energy too.
yeah. So the only difficult part of that is this year is I think that's the very end of Mercury being retrograde. So
Hmm.
this year I tried to get at least most of my shopping done like by shortly after Thanksgiving before Mercury went retrograde.
Hmm.
So I didn't
That's
have a
smart.
bunch of stuff in the mail or coming from Amazon or whatever. Um, but yeah, and then the period from when the solstice is until Christmas or whatever, you can use for like fine tuning things or getting last minute things or whatever, preparation for people visiting, whatever, however your deal set up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And then we
then you can
have,
do the organizing touches those 3 or 4 days of Sun in Capricorn before Christmas.
I don't, I never thought of this before, but I do this when, it's usually the day or day before that I just wrap all my things. And I have a big family, and I swear I was born into the family of the Santa Clauses or something, because it's like, it's my whole life. My parents still get me things right from Santa, or I shouldn't say that because if there's someone that believes in Santa watching this, yeah. Anyway, Santa still drops
No,
presents
Santa's
off at my
totally
parents'
real.
house for
Santa's
me.
totally real.
So I am just like, I just played that game. It's a fun game. So I've been doing it my whole life, and so I always leave my wrapping and getting my stuff organized to the very last minute. So I'm already in the Capricorn, but maybe that's why, because I'm like busy doing like, oh, this and this and this and this and putting all the things together. And then I get to like have fun, doing all the task of wrapping it,
Right,
making sure it's
right,
delivering it. And okay, we'll
right,
be over. See you on Christmas here. Just put this under the tree, whatever. So yeah,
right.
that makes sense. Then we have, when we move on, the 21st, the sun moves into the sign of Capricorn. And the sun moving into Capricorn, what do you got to say about the sun in Capricorn? I actually like this, and I'll talk about it after you tell us a little bit about the sun in Capricorn, what you're thinking.
A weird thing about Capricorn is uh, I used to really dislike a lot of the Capricorn transits. I just did not jive with them. But as I've gotten older, I've found that um, I enjoy the Capricorn transits a lot more than I used to. And I don't know if it's just a getting older thing or what it is, but I jive with it a lot more than now. The Pluto in the last 5 degrees of Capricorn sucked and was just a total shit fest. But in general, like the small amounts of Capricorn, I tend to like now much more than I used to. I tend to jive with them. I mean, it does. It helps you. It helps you be organized and, you know, get things organized and together and situated and stuff. And so I feel that that's helpful. So let's. So I'm sure this will upset somebody. Um, that So there's always an earth sign that follows a fire sign. So like after Aries is Taurus, after Sagittarius is Capricorn, after Leo is Virgo. So the earth signs are the ones that clean up after the party. So after the fire sign party, then the earth signs say, okay, that's enough. Let's put things back in order. Let's put the fires out and put a little bit of sustainable structure to things after all the fire sign partying. So too, I think it's I appreciate the earth sign energy after the fire sign energy because it helps you resort things.
It's those checks and balances, right? So you're not all
Yes.
one way or
Yes.
the other. So I agree with that. And then comes the air sign and just blows up the the earth energy. You just organize everything. I'm gonna make it chaotic again.
Right. Right.
That's the
Absolutely.
nature of the beast. So, but I mean, at least I agree. I love the Capricorn energy. Capricorn, my moon is in Capricorn, so that's one of my things with all the Aquarius stellium that I have. It's kind of a contrast between the two, but I agree. I think that Capricorn during that time, but I really don't think that Jesus was born under the sign of Capricorn because he was too like heartfelt. Capricorn's not heartfelt. He was, but it's okay. It's a good organizer. There's an energy of getting things more put together, which I really think is good. Um, so we can expect that until January 20th or so when it ends up moving into Aquarius, the sun. Then we move on to what I was going to discuss with you is the next aspect on the 24th. So day before Christmas, if you celebrate Christmas, Jupiter squares Saturn. The reason I was going to bring this up is because when Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct with each other, that was 2020. And then, I think this is like another potential movement of the cycle of Jupiter and Saturn. And I know you've done some research and looking into Jupiter Saturn energy over time. So what are you feeling and thinking about the Jupiter Saturn square?
Well, so Jupiter square Saturn is a uh, closing of the financial cycle. So usually Jupiter Saturn squares are not good, not that good financially. So but in this case, this could show you've done all your Christmas shopping. It's time to stop spending because that's like 459 on. So now that Jupiter Saturn square is in effect much more than that day.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a tightening of the financial belt after the exuberance of Sagittarius season. So, which tends to be a little more freewheeling, free spending. Come over here. Leave the kitty alone. So Jupiter square Saturn is a tightening of the financial belt because Jupiter's expansion, Saturn is limitations. And I think I can't remember when the first Jupiter Saturn square was exactly.
No, August 14th. I just looked it up, August 14th. And the last one is in the summer coming up.
Yeah. So that was a very tough time. I think that's when the financial stuff was really coming to the forefront. at that point, because I think that's when they were threatening the dock workers strike, and there was a bunch of stuff going. The inflation was really out of control there in mid-August.
Yeah, it was
Not
the
that it's
19th.
still.
I said the 14th, but I was wrong. I just looked at it again. But yeah, it's true. And when you think about the cycles of this Jupiter Saturn, so Jupiter and Saturn in December 21st, 2020, which was the year nobody will forget, that is old enough to be alive. That was when Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct. And then this year is the first square. So if you follow the path of Jupiter Saturn, I agree with what you said about the Jupiter Saturn energy kind of like being a killer of the joy. I mean, if you want to take it in a literal sense, you could think of that. It kind of is, right? But you said it like in a financial sense. I mean, I think it's possible in any domain, right? So there is the Jupiter Saturn conjunction that was going on in 2020, right at the solstice, and now we're having the first square. Well, it's three of them. We get 3 hits before it moves on. But it's an opportunity to look back at your plans and things that hopefully you were able to think about and plan during that time when it was conjunct, and then assess at this first square, like, are you in the right spot? Do you need to make tweaks and changes? I mean, you can look at any planet and do this, but Jupiter and Saturn, because of the weight that they have, the magnitude that they have, especially if they're connecting with a personal planet in your own chart, which it's going to be at 14 Gemini Pisces, right? When it makes a square.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. When it's conjuncting a planet in your own chart, it'll be affecting you even more. So of course, like we were talking about earlier. So I definitely think, reassessing, and we'll get one more hit with this Jupiter Saturn before it moves on. And the date of that is it is June 15th. And then it won't happen again until, well, actually we'll have the opposition. So, and that'll be years down the road. But we're getting a chance to be able to reassess, and if you didn't make plans that you started in 2020 and you haven't worked on them, like it's time to like tighten up the rope and make it happen, right? And I think that's a good idea, because that's what Jupiter does. It inflates things, but what is it inflating right now? It's inflating Saturn, which Saturn wants us to get real with ourselves, get like down to what's essential and meaningful. So, if you're not doing that, if you're too freewheeling, then it's time to buckle down. And if, you need to make plans to do something, it's time to do that too. So that sounds like a not all that exciting Christmas Eve, though. I will say that, because it happens on Christmas Eve, but we can't.
What's funny is a few years ago we had like 3 years in a row where like Uranus was stationing like on or like the day before.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was like, oh man, that's brutal.
And you know what's crazy too about that is, I think that first time it happened was the Christmas I never got to spend with my Santa Claus family because I had COVID. I was like, geez. So we did like a video. I'm like, never in my lifetime. I've always spent Christmas with my family. That's like they make a big deal of it, and I just play along. But I'm like on camera, on video. It was kind of crazy. So fun stuff. Okay, so we move on from this square and we move to the 26th. So we've passed Christmas. Hopefully everybody has a wonderful Christmas for those of you that do celebrate. And we're on the 26th. The 26th, Mercury makes opposition to Jupiter. What are you feeling about this?
So that's back to, I think Mercury's direct now. And we had that Mercury-Jupiter opposition earlier in the month. Now it comes back, we have that Mercury-Jupiter opposition with Mercury direct instead of Mercury being retrograde.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be interesting to see if things happen on that first Mercury-Jupiter opposition which is now, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it is now. Yeah. Mercury opposite Jupiter is the 4th. That was yesterday. It exacted
Okay,
yesterday.
yeah. So we're still like in the middle of
Yeah.
that. And
Yep.
so then we have that, and Saturn's in there too. So we have the mutable T square again. So it'll be interesting to see what happened this week that comes up the week of Christmas there. It's very
That's a
likely
good
that
point.
something will come back up that happened this week with Mercury direct making those same aspects, the square to Saturn and the opposition to Jupiter.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe like thinking about these could be things that have to do with the mind, or, you know, things that you're working on, mentally working on, because it is involving Mercury and Jupiter. And then, I mean, even because Saturn is mixed in with it as well. So, you know, it could be something that you're planning. Like we're talking about, this could be the idea to make those plans that you thought about in this week to come to fruition. Like I don't try to start new projects or at least put them out into the world. I will work on them or whatnot when Mercury's retrograde. I try not to just put them out into the world when it's retrograde, because like it doesn't always seem to do as good. So I try to be more reserved and internalized during that time. And that's fine. Like the research part of it is good because you can go and lose your mind in that, which is fine. But this could be the week now, is that week of like thinking about, you know, doing those things internally, and then externally sharing them possibly out in the world, if that's what you're going to do with the thoughts and ideas of things that you're working on. So that makes sense. And then we move on to the 27th. That's when the Mercury square to Saturn happens. So that's what we were just talking about. Is there anything you want to add to the Mercury square Saturn?
No, just kind of the same thing about seeing what's going on now, what gets revisited around Christmas.
Yeah.
Although I will say, so I haven't looked at this person's chart, but I think that the top news story of yesterday with this Mercury Saturn square is the CEO of United Healthcare got assassinated just walking down the street.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
And so, I mean, this is clearly an assassination attempt. Well, an assassination, because like there was another person on the street there, and the gunman was clearly going after this guy and did not care about anybody else. It was because there was a person standing on the street there, and he didn't even notice them. He was going after this guy, and he shot him at close range and killed him. So my kind of thought there is, I wonder if they're going to catch the perpetrator around like a few days after Christmas or something.
Interesting. I didn't even know that happened. I wonder what that was all about. Who knows?
Well, he was getting ready to testify before Congress about all the stuff UHC was doing. Like they have the highest percentage of claims that they're not honoring, and apparently they're using artificial intelligence to deny claims. So
how does that work?
and he was going to, well, I think he's admitting that they've turned over their claim process to artificial intelligence. And that's how they're deciding which claims they're gonna pay out for and which ones they're not. And they had the highest rate of claim denials of any of the big insurance companies.
Wow.
Mercury square Saturn.
That's really terrible. And that's a problem. I mean, we we should all know by now that AI does things like hallucinations, you know, like, I don't know if you, you know that, Mark, but it doesn't always say the right things. Like it talks crazy stuff. Like sometimes, I'm not saying it's always bad or it's not a useful tool, but in the sense of healthcare, that's dangerous. That's people's, like, you know, I'm surprised because HIPAA laws, I would think would not permit that, but maybe they don't have it in place, you know. Interesting topic.
Yeah, that was surprising. I'm not shocked they were using AI, but not a surprising outcome, I'm sure.
Yeah, that just seems that's dangerous though. When you're talking about human health, that's I don't know, seems scary. Yeah. Wow. So when we move on in the month, after all of that, on the 28th, we have Venus squaring Uranus. And this is Aquarius Taurus. And this is 23 Aquarius Taurus. Yay! This is going to be when Uranus is on my ascendant. 23 Taurus. Super exciting. What are you feeling about Uranus square Venus square Uranus?
So I think this is maybe where I look at the difference between like how Venus square Uranus and Uranus square Venus are different. So there's going to be anytime you see Uranus, there's going to be an element of shock or surprise.
Mm-hmm.
However, Uranus is clearly the most powerful planet there because it's way further out and its transit time is much longer than Venus. So like Venus stays in a sign for about 3 weeks. Uranus stays in a sign for about 8 years. So Venus is never going to dictate to Uranus. Uranus square Venus, Uranus will dictate to Venus. So that Venus square Uranus can actually be a good thing because it's like it's Venus slightly mellowing. Hey, it's Venus slightly mellowing. Hey, Stella.
Your dog wants to give her forecast.
He's chasing the cat. She's chasing the cat. The cat's an Aries. I'd be careful. The cat's got like 3 planets in Aries and Mercury retrograde. Come here and behave yourself. So Venus square Uranus can be a surprise gambling wins or lottery wins or things like that. Venus square Uranus can be a good surprise, whereas Uranus square Venus is usually not a good surprise.
So how do you tell the difference if Uranus is squaring Venus or Venus is squaring Uranus? Is there a difference? Is it because Venus is retrograde?
No, it's because Venus is direct at that point. It's because
because Venus is first.
Venus is the Venus is the faster moving planet.
Right.
Whereas I guess I should I guess what I meant to say was sit down, for God's sakes. Versus like when transiting Uranus is square Venus in your natal chart.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
That's what I was trying to say. But yeah, so that Venus, the Venus square Uranus will move pretty quickly because it's.
I just realized your dog is wearing clothes. I'm sorry, I couldn't control my laughter.
The dog has a coat on.
She's wearing clothes. That's so funny. Hi, Stella. You have my name. Oh, that's hysterical. Oh my goodness. I understand now,
Yeah,
but
she's in.
that does make sense.
So that, yeah,
Venus,
the Uranus square Venus, like if transiting Uranus is square Venus in your natal chart, that's a much longer and probably more painful transit than transiting Venus square transiting Uranus. I
right?
think I said it wrong at the beginning, but you're right. You can't, you can't, when Venus is square Uranus, you can't tell the difference if it's.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe you were thinking because one was ahead of the other in the zodiac. Or, I don't know. I went to all kinds of crazy thoughts, but that's just me. I yeah. Okay, so the last aspect that we have for this year that is going to be going on that we're going to talk about 1229 Chiron stations direct at 19 Aries. Oh boy. I actually have a few friends with Chiron at 19 Aries, so mine's not that far, but tell us about this.
Yeah, I just I give them a heads up. So
I
Chiron
will.
usually Chiron usually gives you an opportunity to fix things or to re-examine previous traumas, and sometimes for that to happen, not the same circumstance but a similar circumstance will come up that will make you give you the opportunity to look at that transit again, at that incident again. Stop it.
Is she a needy puppy?
This, yeah, this show's gone to the dogs, hasn't it? Yeah, so the dog's a Leo and she's chasing the cat who is an Aries. So again,
A
it's
lot of
the
spiciness.
Sagittarius the Sagittarius sun is getting to the both of them. The Sun Mercury conjunction in Sagittarius is getting to the both of them.
That's funny. So, is there anything about with Chiron making this station direct that might be, something just you think the things that are coming up? Um,
Yes. So I think at any time, like when a planet goes direct, it's been formulating things in the background for a while. So that's maybe a time that you can move forward with things that have been running around your brain for the last few months or whatnot during the retrograde period. And that's a time when you can like move forward with things and you know or present things that you've been working on in the background.
there you go. That's a good thing. Maybe that will be a lift for everybody right at the end of the year.
Right. To
Yeah.
wash out the bad taste of the Jupiter Saturn square.
Yeah. Until the next one.
Until then,
Well,
right. Until
exactly. Exactly. So those are all the aspects that we have going on for next year, or this month until next year. So yeah, and this is interesting.
I
Is there
think we
anything?
and too I think talked about for next year. I think we're gonna try and condense things a little bit. Maybe just I think we're gonna do a preview show maybe with just the big, like we're just gonna go over the big things for next year, and then in the monthly shows we can do the
Get more into the little nuances.
we can,
Yeah.
yeah, I think maybe um, if anybody has any suggestions, feel free to throw them in the comments there. But I think if we go over just like the big, super big things for next year, and then as like a 2025 preview, and then like each monthly thing, maybe leave out some of the smaller aspects and maybe just riff more on like the big things,
Yeah, I think
perhaps.
that would
I just
be really good.
I just think we get into the sextiles and the some of the short moving stuff. I think maybe it gets a little
Yeah.
bit redundant sometimes. Or,
Yeah, and I think that the bigger things have more potential for change too. So that's a
right,
that's
right.
that's a good thing too. Yeah, I agree. But do you have, okay, before we wind up this year, do you have any thoughts about what 2025 is going to be like? A lot of people I've watched a few people on their channels, whatever, talk about 2025 being a better year financially, but I didn't hear about the reasons why. They were astrologers. I just didn't hear the answer as to it being a better year and why it would be a better year. Do you have any ideas, not just that, but like about what 2025 might bring? This year I would think the highlight was a lot of the surrounding a lot of the stuff going on in April, right? But in 2025, is there, any one big thing that you think could be like the pinnacle of it?
So I think I'd say I think we're like over halfway through what I would say is like a 7 year uh, death and rebirth process, like big, like for the people of the earth, like in general. Definitely, there's certain, the United States is coming out of its Pluto return and things like that. Um, I think I think we've come out of a lot of the, like, things happen in phases and like shit, like we don't, and shifts. Like, I rarely is there one day that changes everything. It's usually things working through cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've kind of completed the Pluto and Capricorn, but we've got Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are all going to change signs um, between, early next year and early 2026. And some of them are going to move back, just like Pluto moved back and forth 3 times into Aquarius and still it stay until it, is staying there. I mean, I think we've got multiple transits of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune moving into the next sign and then back into this one, or back into the one they're going to be in once we get into like early 2026. So I think there's a lot of like death, rebirth, figuring out what went wrong. Okay, try it again. There's been a lot of that, but probably, hopefully, not the level of intensity as we got with Pluto. But there is a lot of, I see the shifting and changing, and not only continuing, but probably speeding up, because like what we kind of just came out of is like we got Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all in feminine signs. And once we get into, Pluto's in Aquarius now, but once we get into middle of next year and through early 2026, we're going to have Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all aspecting each other, all in air or fire signs. So I think the transformations are not going to stop. I think they're actually going to speed up. I think things are going to start going really fast. So it's going to feel chaotic, but it's not going to. I mean, look, Pluto and Capricorn at the, like those last, 4.5 years just felt like a boot kicking you in the face all day long, every day. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't think things are going to feel like that. Um, I think it's going to be much quicker, but it's going to be continual changes and shifts. is kind of where I see things going. And then we've got, things are going to move into the next sign and then retrograde and then move back and then retrograde. But I think things are going to move really quickly as we get to. I've not really watched too much previews for 2025, but from what I've seen, I think everyone's expecting it's going to be a really crazy, chaotic year, just full of change. Because while Pluto's moved on, we've got Saturn and Neptune conjunct, which they're going to be conjunct once we get into like the middle of next year. Saturn and Neptune are going to be conjunct each other and doing the back and forth dance at the same time. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of big changes, but Pluto and Capricorn just felt like a slow death march. I think this is going to happen much faster, and it's not going to. There's going to be a lot of chaos, but it's going to move a lot faster, and I don't think it's going to feel
as intense.
I mean, I don't think it's going to feel as intense. I mean, I'm sure that Neptune at 29 Pisces is going to be. I mean, we already had one stretch of that with we already had Neptune at 29 Pisces for a little stretch this year. I know that was a rough transit for most, but hopefully once Saturn catches up to Neptune, it can maybe not feel as much free falling. Saturn can maybe add some structure to the Neptune Pisces pink fairy dust. That's
that makes sense though. Yeah. That does make sense. And I will also like piggyback a small thing that's not really small, but we have been going through a direct midpoint structure with Neptune at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto, and the orb I'm using is less than a degree. It stays in orb in the entirety of next year. Like, even though they're aspecting each other, but they're also doing this midpoint with Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, and it's lingering on. So it is calling for change, calling for something ideals to be maybe challenged or repaired or fixed or edited in some way or another, and so I think that's like kind of backing up what you were saying, the idea of change being something that's necessary, not necessarily easy, but it's something that we're going through. And yeah, Pluto moving away from Capricorn has been a good thing though. So yeah.
I mean,
anyway,
I think one of the difficult parts of things, planets at the end of Pisces and then moving into Aries, is the radical speed difference of things. Because like when things are in Pisces, things feel very slow and dreamlike and ethereal, and then things move into Aries, and then it's like you go from 0 to 100 miles per hour, and so we're going to have like Saturn and Neptune both doing that dance back and forth where it's okay, 0, 100, 0, 100, 0, 100. And so
right.
I think it gets disorienting to people who aren't, natives of the fishy signs. I think it's probably harder for them to digest that and figure out what's going on. But that's kind of the point of astrology too, is to realize that everything's a cycle, and just know it when those cycles end, so when you can switch your vibrational level, if you will.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's why we study astrology and use it, because it does give us a clue as to how we can maneuver through things and make it work, so, or at least just batten down the hatches and say, okay, this is just the time that I'm supposed to be like dodging the punches or whatever. Yeah. So yeah.
Right. I figure like I can deal with about anything. Like if I know like what it is, what the transit is, and how long it's going to last or whatever. I mean, I may, bitch and moan at the beginning, but I can wrap my head around it and whatever. I can't even comprehend how like people get along without like
Me
knowing the
neither.
cycles, knowing what time period they're in. Like, I
The
I
patterns
don't
of
even know. I
it.
wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to
It's a
function
weird
like that.
thing. It's like what do they call it's like you've been, I don't know, whatever, red pilled or whatever they say they call that.
Yeah.
And now I'm not talking politically, talking astrologically. Once you see it, you can't
Right.
unsee it, and so it's there. Then you just
Right.
are
Right.
compelled to see it. And yeah, I get it. I mean, astrology is just like that. Yeah. Well, this was a fun year. Thanks
Yeah.
for.
No, it was. It seemed like it dragged on, and then, man, like once we hit September, it's like things just started moving so fast
Yeah,
that like
it did.
I don't know how we're in December already. Like my brain, my brain can't really grasp it.
Yeah, it feels really like weird. I agree with you though. Once the fall happened, I'm like, slow down. I love the weather. The weather's beautiful where I'm
Right.
at. So it's like, please don't
Right.
go.
Right. Now we had
All
we
right.
had a really warm, long fall, but now it got cold about a week ago. Now it's like
Yes.
the reality's setting in.
Yeah, about a week ago, I was able to open my windows for the first time, which is like heaven for us because in South Florida, it's just constantly hot. It's
Yeah.
hell was modeled after South Florida. I think the weather in the summer
Right.
is pretty like, oh gosh, but what are you gonna do? You get the beautiful winters.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Mark, for joining me. Thanks everybody that made it and listened and watched, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the next year, in the new year. All right, have a good one, everyone.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.